We first heard about the treasure when we were planning a trip to Yellowstone National Park. We were going to be doing an 8-hour drive from Denver, so we put a post on Instagram asking what we should see or do along the way. One of our friends replied with, "Look out for Forrest Fenn's treasure." And our first thought was, who is Forrest Fenn?
Now to the United States, where a real-life treasure hunt is underway, after an eccentric millionaire claimed to have buried a chest filled with gold somewhere in the Rocky Mountains. He's invited anyone who finds the treasure to keep it for themselves. But first, they must decipher a cryptic poem that supposedly reveals the location. As many...
Fenn then wrote a poem with 9 clues, placing the treasure somewhere in the Rockies in one of 4 states: Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, or New Mexico.
Begin it where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk. Put in below the home of Brown. From there it's no place for the meek. The end is ever drawing nigh. There'll be no paddle up your creek, just heavy loads and water high. If you've been wise and found the blaze, look quickly down your quest to cease.
And that was it. We were sucked into this chase that would lead us through abandoned quarries, old miner cabins, ghost towns, volcanoes, and bring us face to face with an 800-pound grizzly bear. But first, we had to try and figure out the poem. Forrest has said that the first clue is begin it where warm waters halt, and that you could figure that out just by looking at a map. So it made sense to look for a body of water with a name that told you it was warm. Since we were already heading to Yellowstone, we started there. Looking at various maps from the area, we began checking the names of water features and pairing them with nearby canyons, since the next line in the poem was, to take it in the canyon down. After hours of research and studying map locations, we were lost. There seemed to be so many places that could fit the poem. So we decided to see if there were any hints in his book. We read it through and then the poem again and went back to our research. What about this creek that leads to a canyon? Suddenly, something clicked. We had a starting point, a canyon, a home of Brown, a place the meek shouldn't go, and a creek that couldn't be paddled up but carried heavy loads. We decided we'd figure out the blaze along the way, so all that was left now was to plan our route. So we were ready to start the actual search, or what more experienced searchers described as boots on the ground. It was getting serious. So where did our findings lead us? Boiling River, a hot spring that flows into the cool currents of the Gardner River. Located in the top left corner of Yellowstone National Park, visitors can swim here with the water temperature being described as comfortable. You can find it by looking out for a sign that says the 45th parallel of latitude, halfway between the equator and the North Pole. It's also located right on the border of Wyoming and Montana. The name tells you that it's hot, but the warm waters halt suddenly when they meet the river below.
Begin it where warm waters halt and take it in the canyon down. Not far, but too far to walk.
We were back in the car and driving down Yankee Jim Canyon. Since leaving Boiling River, we'd passed through Gardner, and we're now driving into the canyon itself. We were heading for the Liner Basin, which wasn't far, but definitely too far to walk, around 24 miles. But before we made it there, we had one stop to make along the way. The Joe Brown Trailhead. Across the road is a boat launch ramp, known locally as the Joe Brown Put-In. At first glance, it seemed to fit the poem perfectly, but after thinking about it more, it didn't make any sense. Not without knowing where Joe Brown's actual home was located, and no one really seemed to know this. Maybe people were getting too hung up on Joe Brown, but after digging some more, we think we found a better home of Brown. Just a little further downstream, there's another put-in. This one's maintained by the Bureau of Land Management, and it's located right below our home of Brown. Right next to the put-in is a bridge, and this bridge takes you into the Liner Basin. From here, we'd be entering the home of Brown, and it was definitely no place for the meek.
Put in below the home of Brown.
There's a sign that welcomes you to the Liner Basin, and it warns you about the very large grizzly bear population in the basin. It literally says it's home to brown bears. And the sign wasn't exaggerating. Liner Basin has one of the largest grizzly bear populations in the Rocky Mountains. It's not unusual to see a dozen bears in one visit, and in the fall, tourists flock there to see the bears eating the caraway root that grows there. As a side note, if you look up the origin of the word bear, it stems from a European phrase which translates to the brown one.
From there is no place for the meek.
The dictionary definition of meek uses words like quiet and submissive, but this is the opposite of how you need to be if you are hiking through grizzly bear territory. The advice is to be loud and to let the bears know you are there. The last thing you want to do is surprise a grizzly bear.
The grizzly bears alone are something to think about.
We also found out that this area had a history of being a hostile environment for the meek. In 1829, a famous fur trapper named Joe Meek was attacked by an Indian tribe right here in the Liner Basin. He was forced to flee upstream, and this is what led him to discovering Yellowstone National Park. Feeling confident we were on the right path, we continued up Liner Creek Road and into Paradise Valley. Liner Creek Road is a well-maintained Forest Service road that is suitable for most vehicles, even sedans. The road takes you up into the mountains and into the Gallatin National Forest. We were entering cowboy country and what felt like Forrest Fenn country, but there were constant reminders that this was definitely bear country.